Netflix series IC-814, The Kandahar Hijack, finds itself in hot water. There were boycott calls issued on social media, with many questioning the portrayal of hijackers in the show. In the series, which revisits the 1999 hijacking of an Indian Airlines flight by Pakistan-based terror outfit Harkatul Mujahideen, hijackers are named Bhola and Shankar. This depiction has been perceived as distortion of facts, with critics saying that it misrepresents the real identities of terrorists. The controversy is not just limited to the names of hijackers, but also the depiction of various events, including what happened within the cabin. Amidst the raging controversy, Netflix India content head was summoned for a meeting with the INB ministry, which happened this morning. It's learned that in this meeting, Netflix has assured that it will review its content to ensure future projects align with national sentiments. The Vice President of Content of Netflix India has also issued a statement saying the opening disclaimer will be updated to add real names of all hijackers. But it went on to add that the code names used in the series were used by the hijackers in the actual events.
This is the only official statement on this matter, and I'm reading it as per a quote from Monica Shergill, Vice President Content, Netflix India. Please pay attention. For the benefit of audiences unfamiliar with the 1999 hijacking of Indian Airlines Flight 814, the opening disclaimer has been updated to include the real and code names of the hijackers. The code names in the series reflect those used during the actual event. India has a rich culture of storytelling, and we are committed to showcasing these stories and their authentic representation.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Joining us this evening are two very special guests. They were both aboard that ill-fated flight IC-814. Joining us this evening are Anil Sharma, cabin crew chief of Indian Airlines flight IC-814. But I'd like to go across first to IC-814 survivor Poonam Kaur, whose identity we are protecting by changing the name. Poonam Kaur, your reaction to this whole controversy that is currently underway about the names being incorrect, about it being portrayed incorrectly, how do you look at it?
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. First, my identity you don't need to hide. I am referred to as Poonam Kaur, and on the flight I was Saibal Kaur. I am not referred to as Saibal Kaur because I like to be called Poonam. So there is no hiding away from my identity. As far as the hijackers were concerned, there were 5 of them. And coming to the point straight, one guy was chief, who was in the cockpit, Azhar Mahmood's brother. The other one was doctor, as they were being called. They were all code names. The third was Burger. The fourth was Shankar. And the fifth was Bhola. After many months of hijack from the Union government, we got to know the true identity. There was never any confusion amongst us as to who they were in terms of the origin. And we pretty much knew that they were all Pakistanis and the purpose of the hijack. And as far as those names are concerned, those are the code names that they gave each other to call out each other. And that's how they were referring to, like, addressing one another. And at all times on the flight, they were with their monkey caps on. So for the first 2 days, you could just see the eyes. And third day, it got so stuffy for them to breathe. And I'm not talking about what was happening inside the cockpit. We are not aware of that, but inside the cabin, main cabin, where we are all incarcerated. The identity was all the time, the faces were covered. So you could never see the face. And the third, this is the nose. And that's how we know them. So there was no controversy about the fact that, there's no distortion of the fact that 2 of them, one thin, scrawny guy who was, the code name was Bhola, and the other guy was a menacingly big guy, was Shankar.
Right.
So I do not know why such a controversy about giving them Hindu names and all that.
Okay. Anil Sharma,
So
would you like to come in on that? In fact, Mr. Carr says that he doesn't know why there is a controversy surrounding the names. Do you agree with that?
Good evening, Madhav. Good evening, Mr. Carr. Great
Yeah,
to
hi,
see you
Anil.
after so many, a couple of decades and a half. He was, I'm just introducing, take a few seconds, Madhav.
Sure.
He was seated in the J class where the guys got up and first went to the cockpit. I was coming out of the cockpit when this happened. Now, coming back to your question, I'm sorry to differ with Mr. Carr because, the very fact that Netflix has decided to climb down and change or accept in the disclaimer that the names were pseudonames and their actual names were this shows some sort of if I may say, mistake committed by them. And it's generally been discussed in the media that the use of these names would definitely have been taken at face value in the years to come. I was watching a show yesterday where actor named Ravira Bhardwaj was along with three other panelists, and she kept saying, "No, it's you should look at it as a work of art, and you should look." They've already put out a disclaimer. They're saying it's based on a particular book and it's a work of fiction and stuff like that. But the three other panelists happened to be one is Sanjay Ladar, who lost his entire family in the Air India crash, Kanishka crash in 1985. And there was another gentleman who suffered because of the Kashmir genocide. When they came out very emotively against that, then she said that, "Oh, I didn't know." Now somebody who is into her 20s and late 20s, I would say, goes to a certain point where she has to accept that she didn't know, and obviously she would have carried that misconception for years to come. You can imagine what would have been the case a few years down the line. People don't have that kind of a patience to dig out the actual story behind it.
Right.
Can I interject here, please?
Yeah, Mr. Carr, the depiction of what's shown inside the cabin. Now, do you agree with Mr. Carr in terms of the depiction and in terms of what's actually shown?
No, I would like to have a little rejoinder to Mr. Anil Sharma.
Yeah.
The issue is about whether Netflix erred in depicting the hijackers as they were being referred inside the aircraft. They made it very clear about the identities of the hijackers. There was absolute clarity. And the hijackers were called Captain, Burger, Dr., Shankar, and Bhola. I would like to put that at rest. Whatever the sentiments may be, that's a different matter. That's a perspective. But as far as truth is concerned, First Officer Anil Sharma knows that those were the five code names that they were using, rightfully or wrongfully. And that's where I rest my case.
Okay. You want to respond to that, Anil Sharma?
Yes, certainly. No, there's no a doubt that they were using those names from the very beginning. They just didn't want to be known by this thing. Now, I am also not going to the intent behind choosing two Hindu names by them, because the other three were non-controversial. They Chief, Burger, and Doctor. Obviously, 25 years, things were vastly different from what they are today. And I don't think they planned that someday we will, someday this will create a controversy. So let's assume these kind of names or give these two names, Hindu names, to two of our gang members. The thing is, but today, the perception of the people matters, that how they're going to look at it, maybe Mr. Carr won't, his family won't, a lot of other people won't. I'm not saying the entire India would do this thing, but a significant percentage of our population is likely to misinterpret. There's so many stories that you read and you don't have the patience to go into the depth of it. If I were to read about, let's say, some sailors of ours who were trapped for 10 months, obviously I'll probably gloss over it.
Right.
Now, this is what the outrage was about, and I'm happy to know that Netflix has come out with clarification. And so that's...
Mr. Sharma, let me put the question a little differently to you. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but there's a senior columnist who's actually written that the deliberate evasions and inventions turned the whole show into an expensive PR job for the ISI. Do you agree with this perception?
Expensive?
Yes, an expensive, as in like an expensive show to produce. It's a PR job for the ISI because it showcases the Indian security establishment, from what I understand, in poor light, is the argument being made here. Do you agree with that perception?
See, first of all, there has also been a debate in most circles that ISI was not responsible. This is what the film tends to give an impression about. And I've known a lot of media personnel today questioning Anubhav Sinha, who's rated as a very accomplished director, that why does it seem that he was trying to whitewash the involvement of ISI? I would like to say that, yeah, and there's people who are claiming, that this is work to Netflix's advantage, that, more people are viewing it and all that. I think that's not the way one can look at it. There are people who are saying that, wish this controversy had not been this thing. There are better things to do in this country, more important issues. No issue is unimportant if it affects the image of the country, if it affects a significant percentage of the population. And if, as well as it being an expensive job for ISI,
yeah,
really had no to say.
Well, that's a perception. You don't have to agree with it. But Mr. Poonamkar, do you want to weigh in on this whitewash charge that's being made?
Yes, I would like to.
Yeah.
Yes. Firstly, I watched the series non-stop. 25 years after the incidents, it hadn't faded away from the memory. And I wanted to see how accurate was Anubhav Sinha in his depiction of what happened inside the aircraft, which I think was woefully lacking. Most of it was fiction, including a part which involved Mr. Anil Sharma. I know it was not the truth. I will not go into that because that is not my remit as far as discussed with you, that I will not talk on that. But at no stage did I feel that ISI was glorified by the serial. In the serial, it was made abundantly clear that ISI was behind it. And not only ISI, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, they were all together into this. At no stage did the serial veer away from the fact that it was the Pakistan dispensation at that time, the military rule in Pakistan. And obviously the ISI related to that. That was behind this hijack. And I was in no doubt about that. So if I was not even a passenger and I was seeing the serial, if I have a choice to see it, and I have a choice to see it in details. So the serial makers did not make a diversion from that. But yes, they erred a lot. In my personal opinion, they should have concentrated more on the happenings inside the aircraft because it was absolutely terrifying. I mean, you can't just say, you can't just show Antakshari and say, oh, they were being glorified. No, it was terrifying inside. Those guys were deadly. And I think that's what Anubhav Sinha missed in doing that, and he focused more on the back end, which he should have stayed away from. It should have been a part of it, because it is the truth that when we were hijacked and the plane was in the Indian space and in Amritsar for nearly 2 hours or more, there should have been a more proactive action by the Indian government then. And that had to be dealt with, because that was the back end story, which was the fact. But I am not purview to what happened in the back end. But he should have concentrated more on the terrorists terrorizing everybody inside the aircraft, including Mr. Anil Sharma and Captain Devi Sharan and Mr. Nangia and the crew and all of them. And that should have been the focus. But I do not think the serial ever digressed from establishing that ISI was behind this.
All right.
The military regime at that time under Musharraf was behind this.
All right. Two interesting points. And of course, I think that's a fair expectation for anybody who's been through those days of terror that the two of you have experienced. Certainly the trauma should be reflected in the serial is what perhaps any survivor would expect. So in that light, Anil Sharma, do you agree with the perception of Mr. Kar that perhaps it should have been a little more in terms of depiction of the fear, of the terror, of what really the people inside the cabin went through?
I wholly agree with him, and he's right because he saw it at very close quarters, and we lived from day to day. We were not very certain what would happen next day, and in fact, on the 30th, most of us believed that was the end of it when they said that we're going to shoot, and if we go shoot one, we shoot all. So these things were never picked up by Anubhav Sena, and I don't think that the lack of screen time was a factor responsible for that. And I also agree with Mr. Kar that he probably should have, if not stayed away, reduce the time given to the back-end operations and and if at all they had to do, there's a brilliant book which was the first one to be released. It was written by late Mr. Jagia in association with Saurabh Shukla, who was then an investigative journalist with Indian Express, and they have done a wonderful job of documenting each and everything, which featured these the bureaucrats at that level. But he chose to make it look like make them look like a bunch of bumbling idiots, and I don't agree with the choice they made of depicting Mr. Doval as somebody who had a comic bent of mind. I've known him much better, to be a much better spy, to be a much better cop and security person. So they've fumbled, they've bungled on that count as well. So there are two issues you could summarize and say that.
But there will be those who argue that there is creative license when stories and tales are reinterpreted. They are reinterpreted to make it more, maybe palatable, or maybe, I don't know, there is artistic license that is involved. So how would you respond to that criticism? Do you think that's still unfair? Mr. Sharma?
Is that question to me or
yes,
to
Mr. Sharma? Mr. Sharma, yeah.
See, I would say that it is not a fair representation. That once you've given the title of that IC-814, and then you say that, okay, it's a work of fiction. Even a work of fiction must not totally deviate from that. Then you call it by some other name, that Indian aircraft hijacked or something like that. Now, there was so many things which happened on the first day. There was violence. There were two men stabbed, and the horror somehow, barring that portion where they show the body being lifted, and the body was lifted by myself and the junior person that we had. They've shown a hijacker dumping the body, and some of these are very insensitive things, and they have not done justice to the way the terror component entered everybody's mind. A lot of people didn't know that Ripon had been killed and Satnam had been there because they were in the forward section and they got off at.
So you are saying the charge of humanizing terror, there is some merit in that. Humanizing the terrorists, there is some merit in that.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I think it's a fair charge because they show now. Just to give you an example, this is what my wife said, that they've shown me to be with blood and everything. No hostess comes to my rescue. But the moment one hostess slapped or something, you have somebody going and saying, oh, are you hurt or something. So, these are, the research team also bungled in big time, Madhav. They show hostess handing out a bottle of water. There were no bottles. No media person used to have those cards the way they've been shown. So the small little things, I think the seriousness was missing.
All right, that's a very, very interesting perspective. Perhaps,
can I come in here, please, on the same question?
Yeah, very quickly, please, Mr. Kar. Very quickly, please, because of the limitations of time, nothing else.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I would love to have a much longer debate with both of you.
I would like to share my experience about that.
Yeah.
48 hours without water. My lips were parched and I was bleeding. I didn't care whether Shankar was sitting next to me, right in front of me with a knife in his hand. I got up and I started walking down the aisle. Bhola, scrawny, thin guy, a mujahideen, edgy, not trained, was carrying a can of Sprite. He saw me, he saw my bleeding lips. He looked at me and he said, "Pyas laga hai?" I said, "Haan ji." He says, "Main pee chuka hoon. Aap piyoge?" I said, "Yes," because it was 48 hours without a drop of water. He let me take a sip, and I took one sip and I gave it back to him. He looked at my face and he said, "Ab thoda sa aur pijiye." The same guy on the 5th day was cracking up, and there was a Nepali guy who was singing and cracked a joke. He took out his gun and slammed him on the head, and he would have shot him. And Berger intervened and grabbed him and calmed him down. Therefore, to have a black and white situation about being humanized, showing as humans, showing as terrorists, when you're not in the scene, then you have a black and white concept. But I'm sharing this is because I'm not saying what Netflix has shown, and I'm still holding that it did not focus on what happened, the terror happening inside. It was like you would have 1 hour of calm, maybe 2 hours of calm, and then suddenly this doctor would come out and give a sermon in Islamic language, and Berger would pull out his gun and said, "I'm going to start shooting."
Right, right.
Or slap you. So
Right.
it was absolute terror inside, and that
Absolutely.
was not shown.
As much as I hate to draw this discussion to a close, I'm sure there are many, many stories over the days that both of you could have shared with us, and we could have had a much longer discussion. But I'd like to thank you so much for coming out, for discussing with us and reliving those very, very painful memories I'm sure that both of you have carried for the past 2.5 decades, and sharing with us your perception on the reality and the real depiction of what has taken place in this series. Thank you so much, Mr. Kar and Mr. Sharma,
Madhav,
for
thank you
joining
very
us
much
this
indeed.
evening.